Sweet. We'll start with an opening song. Will you rise for that?
Our opening song is in 118. Born in Hesburgh, 118.
The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole spirit will be full of light. Let us pray. Dear Lord God in heaven, thank you for this beautiful spring day and for the opportunity that you give us to feel a balance of feelings and thoughts in any day's time. Help us to get better and better today and this week at noticing the difference between those that are true and those that are false, those that are good and those that are hurtful, so that we can make choices between them. Thanks for all that you do for us. Our Father, who art in the heavens, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, as in heaven, so upon the earth. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we also forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. us our trespasses. Amen. Please rise. You'll open your worship brochures. At the top of the second page is our recitation that we'll say together, taken from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 6. The eye is the lamp of the body. So if your eye is healthy, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. If then the light in you is darkness, how great is the darkness? Please be seated. So I asked you a question about things that we count. What are some things that we like to count? Keep count of. Yeah. Scores. We like to keep score. Yep. Money. We count money. What else? Yep.
Miles per gallon.
Miles per gallon. Yep. Blessings. We count our blessings. Yep. Anything else?
Days.
Days till Christmas. I wonder how many there are. Yes. Birthdays. We like to count birthdays. Okay. So there are things that we like to count. All right. Here are some things that we can count. How many of you have parents or friends who count the steps that they walk each day? How many of you know people who count their steps? Right? Okay, so we count our steps to see how much exercise we're getting in a day's time. Sometimes people will count the words that we speak. Did you know that women tend to speak about 20,000 words a day? Whereas men don't tend to say as many words in a day's time. In general, men tend to say about 7,000 words a day. That means that women tend to say almost 3 times as much as men or boys. Okay? Isn't that interesting? Have you ever counted your thoughts? How many thoughts would you guess go through your mind in a day's time? How many would you guess? Yes. Too many to count. Yeah. Anyone else?
I had 6 one day.
6. Congratulations. I only had 5 that day. Yep. 2 million. Wow. It's really a good question to wonder. And actually, I have this written down. I went out on the internet and asked that question. How many thoughts do we think in a day? And what I learned was that experts say that we tend to think between 50,000 and 80,000 thoughts per day, which is over 2,000 or over 3,000 in an hour. Wow, that's an awful lot. But I'm having a doubt about that because if women generally say 20,000 words in a day, I would imagine that they would have quite a bit more, or that men too would have quite a bit more than double that or triple that. So the point is, the number of thoughts that go through your brain in a day's time are an awful lot. There are lots of thoughts that go through your brain. Okay, so where do our thoughts come from? Where do our thoughts come from? You sit down at a workbench one day and say, let me bang out a thought here. Cram it into your mind. Where do they come from? They come from everywhere. Yeah? Where do they come from? Yeah. They're influenced by our past, yes. Mm-hmm. Okay, they're in our brain.
Influence from your environment.
Influence from your environment. Yeah. Okay. Mm-hmm. Pardon? They come from God. Or we could say they come from the other world, right? They come from heaven. Or they come from down below. From different kinds of spirits, okay? So we say in the New Church that our thoughts come into our brains, into our minds, from the other world. We have angels and spirits around us all the time. And they're always touching our hearts with different stuff. And then those thoughts just bubble up into our minds. And there they are. We don't feel them coming to us. They're very silent, but there they are. They come from the other world. So, here's a picture that I have of that. Here's a person, it's you. And here are some thoughts or some feelings coming into your mind and your heart from above, and here they are coming from below. And the ones that are coming from above, the stuff that comes from heaven, has you think, life is okay, as an example. And the stuff that comes up from below, from the nastier spirits, is stuff that might say, it's all bad. Everything's bad. Oh no, life's okay. No, it's all bad. No, life is really okay. No, it's all bad. Do you see? And so there's a balance of thoughts that go on in our minds. And we need sometimes to decide, now wait a second. Which of those thoughts is true right there? And what am I going to do about that? If I like this thought, what am I going to do with this one? If I like this thought, what am I going to do with this one? You see, you have the opportunity to toss one out if you don't like it. So here's where Jesus was talking about that. He was talking with his disciples. And some Pharisees were watching the disciples that day, and they said, "Oh, we noticed that your disciples don't wash their hands before they eat their dinner. That's bad." It says, when the Pharisees then the Pharisees and some of the scribes came together to him, having come from Jerusalem. Now when they saw some of his disciples eating bread with defiled, that is, unwashed hands, they found fault with them. Naughty! For the Pharisees and the Jews do not eat unless they wash their hands in a special way, holding to the tradition of the elders. Then the Pharisees and scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not walk according to the tradition of the elders, but eat bread with unwashed hands?" Then Jesus called the multitude to himself and said to them, "Hear me, everyone, and understand. There is nothing that enters a person from outside which can harm them. But the things which come out of them, those are the things that cause harm." When he had entered a house away from the crowd, his disciples asked him concerning that parable. So he said to them, "Do you still not understand? Do you not know that whatever enters a person from outside cannot harm them? Because it does not enter their heart, but their stomach, and is eliminated." That's kind of interesting. Now, I said that story had something to do with your thoughts. I didn't hear anything said there about thoughts. But Jesus was talking about food that comes into your mouth and goes down into your stomach. And your stomach has the ability to take that food and make some decisions about it. Here's some good food, we'll keep that. Here's some food that's not necessary, we'll get rid of that. So your stomach is pretty smart. And the reason he was telling that story about food and the stomach is he was helping people understand something about their minds. And that is that you have all kinds of thoughts and feelings that come into your mind, just like food going down into your stomach. And your mind has the ability to make decisions about which ones you're going to keep and which ones you're going to get rid of, right? So if I have a thought that says, life is okay, and the next minute I have a thought that says, it's all bad, I can make a choice about that second thought, can't I? I can decide not to spend time with that. I can decide not to keep thinking that. I don't believe that. I don't believe it's true. I believe this is true. Okay? So, I have an activity for us now. I've got a number of thoughts that I'm going to say. And I want you to tell me if that thought is unhealthy, not true, or if that thought is true. Okay? And if it's not true, I'm going to invite you to tell me what would be a true statement instead. Are you ready? Here we go. Someone says to you, "Your music performance was great today." You think, "I totally messed up. Did you hear that one note that I got wrong?" Would you say that's a green check or a black X? Yes. That's a black X. What could you say differently than that? The performance was great. You did miss one note. What could you say instead? I'll just practice some more. I won't miss the note. Okay, great. Nice. Okay, here's another one. My music teacher said I need to practice my scales. I must not be as good as others in the class. Maybe I'll quit music. Black X, yeah, I would say so too. Right, and I forgot, when you get one of these black X's, what do you do with it? Throw it away. Throw it away. Okay, what could you say instead? Adults, you can jump in and help if you wish. Anyone?
I'll practice more.
I'll practice more. Okay, let's keep that one. Here's another one. She's doing that just to bother me. X or check? X. Throw it out. What's a check mark? Instead, she's doing that just to bother me. You're smiling. Did you do that yesterday? Okay. Yes?
Perhaps she's having a bad day.
Perhaps she's having a bad day. Okay. Or maybe I just don't know. Here's another one. Did you hear that one note I got wrong? I'll never be good at music. I'll just keep messing up forever. Throw it out. What could you say instead? I'll never be good at music.
I will be good at music. I will try practicing.
I will try practicing. We've got a lot of practicing going on today, yes?
A growth mindset. I can't do it yet.
I can't do it yet. A growth mindset, you said? Is that what that's called? That's great. I love that. Okay. Johnny was mean to me on the playground. He's just a bad kid.
Maybe John would have a bad day.
Uh-huh. Okay, so we're tossing out a bad X. Maybe Johnny's having a bad day. Okay? All right? I fell asleep while talking on the phone with my friend last night. I'm just the worst friend. Who wants to come up here and toss out an X? Come toss out an X. Okay, what could you say instead? I fell asleep, I'm just a bad friend. I must be the worst friend. Pardon? They probably found a friend. Nice. Okay? Your music performance yesterday was great. Nah, I was just lucky. I was just lucky. Here you go, Nico. Come throw out a black X. Throw it out. Right. Get rid of that. Okay. So your performance was great. Instead of, nah, I was just lucky, what could you say? What could you say? Yep.
I'm grateful when it goes well.
Yeah.
And when it doesn't, I'll brush that place up.
Yep. Great. Okay. I really wanted to go to the birthday party, but it was Dad and Mom's anniversary and the whole family was going to be there. I'll never be invited to another sleepover and I won't have any friends. It's catastrophizing. Do you know the answer? I love the birthday party. Do you want to come throw out a black X? Do you want to come up and throw out a black X? Nice. Yeah. There you go. Just throw it out. Throw it. That's it. Get rid of it. Yes. And what did she say? I love what? What did she say? I love the birthday party. Isn't that sweet? Why don't we just stop there? I had a few more, but that's probably enough to make the point. The point is that the Lord tells us you're going to have all kinds of feelings and thoughts enter your mind in a day's time. 50 to 80,000 of them. That's a lot of thinking. And with the Lord there, you have the ability to decide, what am I going to do with those thoughts that I don't believe or that I don't want to believe? I'm going to throw them out. I can do that. The Lord can help me with that, and I can choose something truer to believe instead. Okay? Why don't you, let's just move on. So, to the adults today, I want to say that our theme is that what we think and how we think about things impacts our ability to function well in relationship. Distorted thinking causes damage, hurt, and pain. And accurate thinking, or good thinking, invites health and healing and happiness into relationships. So what do we mean then by distorted thinking? Distorted thinking means thoughts that pop into our minds that are inaccurate, that are not quite true, or that are patently simply false. We could think of them as being dysfunctional thoughts, or bad thoughts, or unhealthy thoughts. And out there in the world, people like to think of that kind of thinking as being stinking thinking. I've heard that phrase before. So, as an example, you send a text message or an email, or you leave a voicemail for someone, and you don't hear back right away. And in the absence of any other information, you might assume the other person's upset with me. A friend and a would-be child psychologist convinces you that what your child needs is tough love. And so you try dishing some of that out, and things go south. And they keep getting worse and worse. And in the end, you realize this child does better with a velvet glove than they do with an iron fist. You believe in your brand of religion. And somehow your brand of religion has impressed you with the idea that all people of all other faiths are going to hell. And that drives a wedge between you and other people. It drives a wedge perhaps between you and family members if they convert to another faith. Or it invites conflict between whole groups of people and even nations. You've chosen an unhealthy lifestyle, or you're making unhealthy choices for yourself. And when someone challenges you, your ego bristles up, and you rationalize and you justify your actions by the thoughts in your mind, and your life continues to go downhill. So those are some examples of how negative thoughts or bad thoughts or dysfunctional thinking causes damage, hurt, and pain, whereas good thinking invites health and healing and ultimately happiness. So we're coming now to the end of our series this year from the Sermon on the Mount. And last week Jesus said, "Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth. Lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven." Mac talked with us about setting our hearts on the things of heaven, things that will be a permanent part of our characters that we will take with us into the other world. And not setting our hearts on earthly things that are relatively unimportant and that we'll leave in the grave when we depart this world. So now in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus moves on from talking about our hearts to talking about our minds and the role that our thoughts and understandings play in helping us set our hearts on the things of heaven, or that cause us to remain stuck and attached to earthly, mundane, less important things that are going to die with us in the grave. Jesus said, "The lamp of the body is the eye. If therefore your eye is good, your whole body will be full of light. But if your eye is bad, your whole body will be full of darkness. Therefore, if the light that is in you is actually darkness, how great is that darkness?" Basically, what he was saying to people by those words is that what you think and how you think is important. The lamp of your body is your eye. And jumping up a level to the level of our spirits, the lamp of your spirit is your understanding, or the way that you see things or think about things. If the way that we think about things is good and wholesome and pure and sound, then he says our whole spirit will be full of light and wisdom and ultimately happiness. But if our thoughts are untrue or false or mean or nasty, then our whole spirit will slide in the opposite direction and become full of darkness. The theology of the New Church says that there are basically three sources of falsity. One is ignorance. The second is false principles that we've taken into us. And the third is a selfish ego or ill will that we hold toward ourselves or other people. By ignorance, we're not talking about stupidity, which is the way that word is commonly used in our culture today. By ignorance, we simply mean not knowing. You simply don't know the facts of a situation. And so naturally, your mind tends to fill the void with something that you imagine to be true. like sending a text or an email, and you don't hear back, and you assume that the other person is upset with you. A false principle means any false belief that you carry in your mind that's been impressed on you by your religion or by other people around you while you've been growing up, or that you've grabbed from the internet or heard your buddies say at school. Think of the religious wars that have happened in this world, or other atrocities, religious atrocities that have been based oftentimes in some false principle of a faith. Or think of sage advice that you've been given that's out there in the world around you, and it's simply the wrong way to go. It's just not a healthy way to go. It's out there. And there is selfishness or ill will that we can experience in our hearts that causes us to think and believe all kinds of nasty things about other people and even about ourselves. Just self-destructive thinking. It's interesting that in our world today, a lot of work has gone into identifying and classifying different types of false thinking that create trouble in human lives. Basically, destructive thinking has been brought down to 14 categories, including things like tunnel vision, which means focusing on a single negative detail to the exclusion of everything else. Passing unfavorable judgments on situations or circumstances in our lives. All or nothing thinking. I'll never be a good friend. Disqualifying the positive. Catastrophizing. Jumping to conclusions. Fortune telling, and on it goes. So there are these different classifications of false thinking that have been identified. And it's useful to know them because they can help us identify false or dysfunctional forms of thinking that come into our brains and then make choices about them. Realize that the thoughts that we entertain are like signposts along the way that point us either in the direction of heaven and the heavenly treasure that we want to hold, or that point us in the direction of misery and lead us in that direction. One of the things that can be true about thoughts is that they tend to slide in one direction or another, and most often our thoughts tend to slide in a negative direction. So you send that text or that email or leave that voicemail, and when you don't hear back at first, you don't think twice about it, or you think, oh, they're probably busy. But as time goes by, those thoughts start to slide, and you begin to think and wonder and tense about it, and you end up seeing the worst in the situation. And that way of thinking is something that can then snowball until it's all out of proportion and is absolutely the opposite of what the reality might be. So these thoughts that come into our brains, 50 to 80,000 of them in a day's time, can tend to slide in a negative direction. And when they do, they can run away with us, they can overtake us, they can enslave us in the moment until we absolutely believe they are true. Until we put our faith in them and they become our faith in that moment. It's interesting to wonder, why don't thoughts slide in the opposite direction? Why don't we spontaneously assume the positive in our lives and in relationships? And why don't our thoughts go uphill and in a better and better and brighter direction until our whole spirit, as Jesus said, is overflowing with true and beautiful and wise thoughts? Why doesn't it happen that way? And one of the reasons is that underlying our thinking is our human ego, which we spent 6 weeks talking about in February. So our human ego, our human self, our human will, the feelings that we experience, the wants that we have, the longings that we have, the desires that we have for things to go certain ways in our lives. And some of those feelings and desires and wants and wishes are good, and they're wholesome, and they're healthy. And others of them can be somewhat negative or selfish or defensive or fear-based. So we're told in the scriptures and in our theology that we don't create the thoughts that come into our minds. Most often they pop into our minds without any effort on our part. They're inspired into us from the other world. And when those thoughts are inspired into our hearts by the Lord and the angels, our thoughts tend to be helpful and healing and hopeful and positive. But when our thoughts are inspired by some nasty spirits who may be nearby, spirits of selfishness or greed, they tend to be hurtful and destructive and painful. We know from other places in the scriptures that when we experience negative feelings and thoughts, it doesn't mean that we're bad people. It simply means that something has gotten sparked off in us, and we have some choices to make about what we'll do with what's coming into us. In other words, we have spirits in the other world that are all too willing and ready all the time to dump negative stuff into our hearts and minds. And isn't it true that when we're in a negative place, when we're functioning along with those false thoughts that are coming into our brains from outside of us, how absolutely wrong we can be in our thinking? A perfect example of this, I think, is mind reading, where we tend to read thoughts and intentions and motives into other people around us, often of a negative nature. And those things can snowball, and then when we bump into that person and find out the truth, we find out we were just so wrong. We were dead wrong. And isn't it also true that once we start down that road of negativity, and once we're going down into that rabbit hole, it can snowball and get worse and worse until our whole spirit is full of death and darkness and destruction at that particular moment? Jesus said, "If the light that is in you is darkness, how great is that darkness?" It can get really dark. So how can we get to a place where our eye is good and not bad, using the words of Scripture, so that our whole spirit can be full of light and wisdom and wholeness and eventually happiness? We can do it simply by testing our thoughts that present themselves and simply discard the ones that aren't true. If we don't know what the truth of a situation is, one option is to accept that we don't know until we can gather some more data and find out what the real truth is. Don't make up a false explanation to fill that void. Be willing to question our religious principles that we hold, the sage advice that you've accepted from friends or off of the internet, the rules of life that you've developed for yourself out of the blue. Are these things, or is your understanding of them, really true? Do they lead to health and healing and happiness, or are they leading you down a road of damage and hurt and pain for yourself and for other people? If these things are not true, then simply toss them out. Refuse to believe them. I'm not going to spend time with that thought. I don't have evidence that that is true. Know the truth. Think the truth about yourself and about other people. Believe the truth that you know about them. Put your faith in what is true rather than what is false. And beyond that, I want to acknowledge that testing our feelings can also be useful. Testing our feelings, our heart, and our will. Because if our thoughts are actually linked to our feelings, and if those feelings are hurtful feelings or destructive or nasty, then one of the best ways to deal with the thoughts that are there is to chop away at the root of the problem. That is, deal with those feelings. But whichever way we go, whether we're dismissing our thoughts outright or whether we're stepping away from ill will or stepping away from desires that are destructive, I want us to realize that that can be challenging. It is not easy to tell ourselves the truth when that thought seems so true. It's not easy to have the willingness, if we can see that it's false, to stick with that, to stand by that and say it's false and I'm just not going to go there. It can be challenging to focus on the positive instead of the negative once you've dismissed it, because that negativity tends to want to come back. And it can be difficult to really believe the truth in life or the truth about other people or even about yourself. It can be really challenging. But the truth is that the Lord is there with us. And no matter how challenging it can be to discard those thoughts that seem so true, realize that in the Lord's own life on earth, there was not a single negative impulse or feeling or want or thought that he himself didn't experience. Thoughts that we have had, he had all of those thoughts as well. And he mastered every single one of them. He can enter into us at any given moment in time, and no matter how powerful those forces feel inside of us, he can neutralize them. Ask him to do that sometime when you're dealing with a really negative feeling or a negative thought that you're really believing. Ask him, come in and neutralize this thing, and watch what happens. He will neutralize that thing. He'll stop it cold and give you the space to be able to say, okay, I can make a choice about this. And then he'll give you the power to follow through and not believe it and choose to go in another direction. The lamp of the body is the eye. The lamp of your spirit is your thinking. Therefore, if your eye, what you think or how you think, is good, your whole body, your whole spirit will be full of light. And the Lord is the Lord of it all. Amen. I invite you to bow your heads for a time of prayer. Dear Lord God in heaven, thank you for the simple truths that you teach us in your word and the depths to which they take us. Help us to take the learning that you've given to us today and walk forward into today and the rest of our week, looking for the difference between what is true and what is false. Give us the strength to toss out what doesn't work and to choose instead what is healthy and true and good. Amen. And now we hear the silent prayers of our hearts. Amen. We rise for our next song.
Our next song is number 129. Open your eyes. 129.
Lord, will you accept this free will offering from all of us? Let it be a sign of our willingness to meet people where they are and walk together with them on pathways toward heaven. grace of our Lord Jesus Christ be with you all. Amen. We'll have our closing song.
Our closing song is number 176, Thy Word, 176. Our first solution is number 109, Lift Up Your Heads and See. It's also our song of the month.
With power and glory, with power and glory,
Lift up your heads and see, soon you will be redeemed. He's coming with power and glory. Lift up your heads and see, soon you will be redeemed. He's coming with power and glory. Now is come salvation, salvation and strength, the kingdom of God and the power of Christ. Lift up your heads and see, soon you will be redeemed. He's coming with power and glory. Lift up your heads and see, soon you will be redeemed. He's coming with power and glory. Now is come salvation,
sure we've talked here before about the litmus test of things you say about is it kind, is it useful, and truthful. And thinking about that, even with thoughts that come into your mind as a way to counteract them. So you take a lot of time talking about the truth part, but if something's coming at you with your thoughts and it's obviously not kind, you just disregard it right there. So just that idea of trying to have the litmus test be on yourself as well, using the kind, useful, truthful thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. Anyone else?
Switching off thoughts isn't always an easy process.
This is true.
Somebody like myself who has high stress and anxiety, the thoughts repeat themselves over and over again. And so the switch isn't always easy to switch off. So what I've come to figure out is either prayer, and sometimes prayer needs to happen over and over and over again to keep whatever's going on in your brain from connecting to it again. And then removing myself from that situation where you're able to think about it, sort of a distraction.
Yeah.
So long as the distractions are good distractions, whether it's doing something, whether it's even work, doing things with people, my wife, all those are good ways of distracting my brain from things that isn't easy to just shut off.
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead.
Just kind of building off what he said, like this year hasn't exactly been the easiest for me for a number of reasons, but
Me either.
yeah, but like just kind of like he said with high anxiety, the thoughts just kind of come and come and come, and it's really hard to switch it off sometimes. But oftentimes, like in the moment, you'll be berating yourself. That's what I do, and you'll be like, "Oh, I'm so bad at this. I can't do anything."
Yeah.
But then you come out of it, and you realize I actually didn't do that bad on that. And it's just coming to realize in the moment, like the Lord is supporting me through all this, no matter what. It's hard to remember. It really is.
Yes, that's true.
But when you can, and when you can do your best to switch those thoughts off, that's when I get my best work done.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, so we're talking, I've heard 3 or 4 or 5 different ideas already for ways that we can, techniques that we can use to help turn these things off. And the one I'm encouraging is, and let the Lord in. Let him come in and silently do his work. He's powerful. With God, all things are possible. Without me, you can do nothing. One thing that can be really helpful, actually, is to write your thoughts down. Sometimes you think them in your brain and you don't see how illogical they are. But for some reason, when you write them down just in a list, just getting them outside of yourself makes you go, wow, that's really crazy. And you could even write a response to each one of them. Tell the truth right there on paper. That can be clarifying and powerful as well. So just different techniques. Appreciate it. Is there one over here?
Yeah, you gave a sermon a couple months ago, I think, where you talked about thoughts and calling them out when they're not from a good place. And I took from that just that when I'm thinking something that's from hell, I say, this is from hell and I don't need it. And that's really been useful for me, just to actually say that in my mind, because it really kind of just shows it for what it is.
Yeah. This is from evil spirits who are with me. Swedenborg says that if we would just remind ourselves of that when something's coming at us, this is from evil spirits who are with me. Right away, the angels are given space to come in and start turning it away. Fascinating stuff. The easier form of repentance can also be very helpful. I'm thinking about this, and I'm intending to act on it in some way, perhaps. But because it's a sin, I'm not going to do it. And watch what happens. The Lord can just, with that simple mantra, it's amazing how much power that can have to stop the force of these things. Anyone else? Okay. So let's go to our announcements, and we have a number of highlights that I want to do. Number one is, here in my hand, I have a list of the 14 what are called cognitive distortions that have been isolated. If you'd be interested in seeing these, feel free to take a copy. I have 10 of them here. I have a longer version of this which gives paragraph explanations for each and every one of them, but that's a longer document, so this is a breakdown. So feel free to help yourself to one of them. We have this week coming up our GNCS, Glenview New Church School End of the Year celebration on the back of your handout, and if you would like to come support that and to witness it, you're welcome to come. Number two, we're going to have a farewell barbecue for the Fraser family next Sunday at Mine and Allen's place right across the street. What time did we say that was starting? 5:30? I think it was 5:30. So next Sunday, the 9th. The following Sunday, the 16th, it says June 19th, our church's birthday, but the event is going to happen on the 16th, Sunday the 16th. We'll have a worship service at 11 o'clock for the traditional folks over here, and then in the afternoon at 4:30, we're hoping to have a pageant. And anyone from 3rd grade up through high school that would like to be involved in that, please speak to me or send me an email or something, okay? Graduation cards are still out here, ready to go for students. What is it? 8th grade, high school, and college?
Yep, and one was added since last time because I forgot.
Okay.
So if you have already done it and figure out the hook, there's another one that would love to add a signature.
There's lots of signatures there. Let's just flood those cards with signatures for the kids we want to support. Let's see. There is a gift for Brian and Gretchen Keith. Brian Keith being the executive bishop who's going out after a number of years of serving in that office. You can read about that if you'd like to give a monetary or other type of gift. Let's see. And then finally, last but not least, did you all know that Katie Fuller, 103 years old, passed into the spiritual world yesterday? 103 years old. That's our second centurion this year that has gone to the pearly gates. She was, I'm not sure of the circumstances around which she passed away, but evidently it was peaceful. I could tell you a story, but I don't know that I have permission to do that, but it's a neat story, and maybe that'll get around sometime. Good thoughts toward Katie, who's going to join her husband, who passed away 37 years ago in 1980 or 82. Do the math, 82, I think. Yep.
Just a quick announcement.
Okay. So, just nice thoughts and prayers to Katie now on her way, and also to the Fuller family. We'll have more information about memorial service coming up. Okay? Yes. Final
Just real quick, Elmo Acton is coming into town. He is going to have a U-Haul pulling up in front of the Fraser's house on July 1st. He has memories of the Glenview Church getting together to move him into so we're looking forward, just to put it in your calendar, July 1st, Sunday after church. There'll be a movie van in front of that house, and he's looking for help to move him in.
Okay. June 30th then?
Is that Sunday?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, June 30th.
So it is Sunday?
Yes.
Okay. All right.
Anniversary.
It is that time. Do we have any, thank you, do we have any, what month are we in right now? June, thank you. Do we have any June anniversaries?
We have whatever yours.
Anyone else? Okay. Yes? How many years? 4. Congratulations. And over here. Pardon? 40. 40 years. I'm pretty sure about that. Okay. Well, good. That's a nice, happy note to end on, everybody. Have a great day, a great week. We'll see you next week. Take care. Yeah.